May the words of my mouth and meditation, thoughts of all of our hearts and minds be pleasing to you, O Holy One. Amen. That was really good. Thank you. So Paul encourages the community of Philippi to rejoice in the Lord always. The part that gets me about that is the always bit. It leads me to ask the question, what was Paul smoking? I know it's Thanksgiving weekend in Canada and everything, but when you look out at the real world, as many call it, what is there to rejoice about, especially if you're supposed to rejoice always? We are experiencing the joy of simultaneous elections, both here and in the U.S., and for me anyways, they do not exactly inspire joy. Campaigns in both countries are in their final stretches, and so the attack ads and the mudslinging is beginning to accelerate. And the reason they do this, apparently, according to the pollsters, is because it's so effective, which says what about us who are on the receiving end of those? So elections don't bring out the best in the human species. Rejoice in the Lord always. I have no problem rejoicing when the score is going my way, but when the odds against winning are stacked against me, then I question this business of rejoicing always. We're about to head into, or we are in the midst of, what looks like it's going to be at least a worldwide recession caused by foolishness and greed and market ideology run amok. I mean, it's amazing, this human condition. First it was tulips that were going to save us. Then it was technology. I lost a bundle on that. And now it was supposed to be these mortgages. And then you have our Prime Minister coming out and suggesting on national TV that there are some really good buying opportunities for all those people who have so much money lying around to invest in the stock market. Rejoice in the Lord always. And I even began to talk about all those daily worries and preoccupations that are a part of every person here today. And those kind of worries just kind of suck the joy right out of life. At least that's my experience. And I'm not going to go any deeper into this because I don't want to descend so far into depression that we can't climb out of it. But you can see that Paul's teaching to rejoice always could be regarded as a kind of Pollyannish denial of reality. Is it a kind of don't worry, be happy, escape from reality? Well, I actually think it's just the opposite. It's just what the doctor has ordered for times such as these that we're living through. And remember, the basis of his admonition to rejoice, in spite of it all, is not naive optimism. It's his own deep conviction and experience that the Lord is near. And we shouldn't think that Paul had it any easier than we do, friends. He was thrown into prison. He was thrown out of cities. He lived with serious illness. He had a physical ailment that we don't know about. But through it all, he had this deep conviction based in his own experience that he was in Christ. In the language of those days, that the Lord was near. See, Paul knew there were two Pauls, in a sense. There was the Paul that was subject to the ups and downs of everyday life, the betrayals of friends, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, absolutely. And this Paul needed to have his wits about him. He needed to function in the real world. He needed to make wise decisions as best as he could in the midst of the storms of life. But as a mystic, Paul was grounded in a deeper identity that was untouched by the storms of life. In another letter he writes, "It's no longer I, but Christ who dwells within me." He lived and moved and had his being within an ocean of love and being and joy and compassion, which he called the Christ, or the Lord. And at the deepest level, mystics throughout the ages of every faith tradition have said, this is the most real part of ourselves, our essential self, if you like, and we could call it our Christ self. And so our portfolios go up and they go down, but this center of wholeness, of holiness, is just pure joy. That's why we can, when we're in touch with it, rejoice in the Lord always. Our moods swing wildly in any given day, reacting to this or that. But our essential self is untouched. This part of us knows that we are not our financial wealth, knows that most of the ways we've come to identify ourselves as parent or husband or wife or single or good or bad or stupid or really smart or weak, all of these are absolutely real identities, but they are also absolutely partial identities. These identities are subsumed within this much deeper, more essential self. These partial identities are, they've been created by genetics, by the families we grew up in, by the circumstances and life conditions we've had to face, but they all emerge from a deeper source, from the heart of God, from which we're born, into which we return, and this is the peace that we've forgotten because of all these other worries and concerns that cause us to focus on this partial self, just trying to survive. We've forgotten this. And the spiritual journey is all about, in the end, remembering this and just situating ourselves in this deeper self, this Christ consciousness. Here is a storehouse of joy that can never be exhausted and is not subject to the ups and downs of our other self. And so we have to learn this facility to be able to shift in and out of these two identities, because we got to live in the real world, but then we got to be able to slip into and stay in touch with this ocean of being that is pure joy. That's the challenge. And I've talked about these two parts of ourselves before as the part of us that's becoming, the part of us that lives in the, quote, real world, and the part of us that is being. And when Paul encourages us not to worry because the Lord is near, it's my understanding that we are to take this metaphor of the Lord being near mystically, not literally. He wasn't talking about a temporal or a spatial reality here. It's not that the Lord is out there somewhere as a separate being and we're waiting for him in time to come to us. That's at least not my understanding. All it requires is a shift in focus, a temporary shifting away from the external circumstances of our life and toward this ocean of being, this ocean of joy. It's just always there. It's the deepest part of who we are. And, this kind of experience sometimes comes to people spontaneously. Eckhart Tolle had this experience where he knew he wasn't just this egoic self, for lack of a better word. He just was totally dropped into this ocean of being. And he experienced bliss. He walked around for 3 years in a state of bliss, joy. Didn't matter what was going on. He had no money he has a lot of money now. He didn't have a lot of money then.